Well, Alberta has formally proposed an oil pipeline to the southwest coast of British Columbia, and despite previous promises or comments from the federal government, it's looking like it could be significantly funded by taxpayer dollars.
Canada and Alberta will be equal partners in this project. The Trans Mountain Corporation will plan and construct the pipeline.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says the details of funding and how much it could cost Canadians to help foot the bill have not yet been finalized. But Alberta's pitch does note that the pipeline could cost an estimated $35 to $43 billion. I'm joined by Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, Tim Hodgson. Hey there, Minister. Thank you for making the time.
Great to do this.
The initial indications about this pipeline were it seemed that it was going to be built with private money. Prime Minister Carney said in November, if there's not a private sector proponent, there won't be a pipeline. Now it seems the vast majority of this, perhaps 90%, is going to be public money. If the bar here, your own bar for doing this with private financing, hasn't been met, why are you moving forward with the project?
So I think, Catherine, Canadians understand that there are four things about this project that why it needs to go forward. The first is national security. I think the announcement on July 1st that the U.S. doesn't want to move forward with CUSMA was pretty clear. The old world that we were involved in no longer exists. We need to look after ourselves. We need to do more for ourselves than anyone can take away for us. This is part of building for ourselves, building an autonomy for ourselves going forward. The second is economic prosperity. This project is the most significant economic opportunity in the country today. It is the largest generator of GDP of any project we're looking at. It's $16 billion a year for the people of Canada that pays for healthcare, that pays for dental care, which pays for childcare, which pays for subsidized post-secondary education at a time when affordability is on everybody's mind. Thirdly, it brings Alberta into the fold with the rest of Canada from a sustainability standpoint. A year ago, we were not seeing eye to eye with the province of Alberta. Today, we have agreement on world-leading methane reduction. We have agreement on how we build carbon markets going forward, and we build the single biggest carbon capture and storage project in the world. Canada is a world leader in clean tech with this project going forward. And fourth, and really importantly, as I'm sitting here in Alberta, is national unity. Albertans want to know there's a place for them in Canada going forward. We have found a path through the MOU, through the integration agreement, and through this part of that bigger package to show Alberta there is a good place for them in Canada. And for all those reasons, we need to engage with the world the way it is, not as we wish it to be. And we're going to build this project.
And yet you are the ones, it was the federal government and Alberta who wrote in this MOU construction of one or more private sector constructed pipelines. That's the language that you folks chose. There's no mention of public funds. Did you know then that the lion's share of this was going to be public money?
So, look, as we look at this, we're focused on attracting private sector capital to this. That's what we've done. We've attracted Pembina to this. I think when we first started, people were worried about whether this would be a good investment. What I can tell you today is we've been approached many times about selling the Trans Mountain Pipeline. The Trans Mountain Pipeline is a moneymaker. It's one of the best assets that this country has. It is generating oodles of cash. It is full. People said it wouldn't be full. It is full. It is generating oodles of cash. And that cash is paying for our daycare. It's paying for our healthcare. It's paying for our subsidized post-secondary education. It's paying for the school lunch programs that Canadians want.
But Minister, I'm going to interrupt because it doesn't answer the question. And the question is, when you put the MOU out, did you realize this was going to be mostly public money?
So what we wanted to make sure was we attracted a private sector proponent, and that's what we've done. We've got a private sector proponent who's saying, "Hey, we think this is a good opportunity. We're going to be there." The fact that we're on the southern route, which is the route the TMX knows, makes it only logical that the TMX, the Trans Mountain Corporation, should be involved. The new line will mirror the existing line they operate, and so they're in the best position to be part of this.
Okay, I want you to help me a bit here with I want to just stay on public money for a bit longer because it's such a substantial sum, sir. In Alberta's, the proposition that they put forward to you folks, they suggest the pipeline, in order to build it, will cost between $35 billion and $43 billion to build. Pembina's in for 10% right now. The remainder, it seems to me, is federal and Alberta money split in half. So what are we talking here about federal contributions? Somewhere between, what, $50 and $20 billion?
So you just used the numbers $33 billion. I just told you that this project will generate $16 billion of GDP a year. $16 billion a year.
Yep.
The Trans Mountain Pipeline is highly profitable.
Right.
I am quite comfortable that this is a good investment for Canadian taxpayers, and it's part of that bigger package that we talked about, where we're getting the methane regs, where we're getting new carbon markets, where we're getting the biggest carbon capture and storage, where we now have an agreement on how to build nuclear.
But Minister, no one has said what the federal investment is. I hear you about the payoff. I just want to understand, and I think it's a pretty basic question, how many federal dollars roughly you expect to invest. Is it $15 to $20 billion? Is there some other factor that plays into this?
So I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, Catherine, so I don't want to make numbers up. But the previous pipeline cost in the $30 billion to $40 billion range, that's a reasonable thing to look at.
Pembina says...
At those.
Pardon me, sir. I didn't mean to interrupt there. I do want to ask you, though, you talk about the private sector of this. Pembina says it has tentatively, essentially, signed on with this 10% stake. I look at the language in their news release, very cautious. They point out the deal is non-binding. They still need to evaluate participation. There are conditions that have to be met. Again, and when we try to understand the future of this project, is there a world, does the pipeline still go ahead if they don't sign on to this in the long run?
So we are moving at speeds we haven't moved at in generations, as the Prime Minister said. We need to do that. The world is in a difficult place. We just saw on July 1st that the Americans say they don't want to renew CUSMA. We're in the middle of a global energy crisis where our allies are running out of natural resources and energy. They desperately want our energy. We need to move forward. This is an opportunity to move forward in a way that addresses national security. It's a way that addresses national prosperity. It's a way to address sustainability and have a functioning carbon market and a Alberta that's in Canada. And it's a way to move forward at a time where national unity is really important.
I'm interested in what you said. You brought up CUSMA twice now. You would say to Canadians explicitly that part of the reason to go forward with this pipeline is because the Americans don't want to renew CUSMA?
Absolutely.
Okay.
When we only have one customer for our oil, and we sell that oil at a discount to world markets because we only have one customer, and that customer is doing things that are weaponizing our trade against us, the way you respond is you create the ability to sell to the rest of the world.
Okay.
Today, most of the oil that's going through the TMX pipeline is sold to our allies in Asia. We need to show our ally to the south of us that we have alternatives. Okay. We need to be able to earn a world price for our oil. When we sell at a discount to the Americans, we are losing billions of dollars that we could be spending on healthcare, that we could be spending on dental care, that we could be spending on daycare, that we could be spending on our school lunch programs. I think Canadians expect us to get the best price for our resources so we can provide the services Canadians want. And if we're going to do that, we need to get a pipeline built to the coast.
Your former cabinet colleague, Steven Guilbeault, would be familiar with all of those arguments. He is still a sitting Liberal MP. In fact, we're going to talk to him in a few minutes. He reacted to news of this pipeline by saying, in part, another project will be funded by taxpayers, even as oil companies are expected to earn $60 billion in profits this year. All of this is happening as we are seeing heat waves hitting numerous corners of the globe, and as northern Quebec is seeing 4 times the number of forest fires we would normally have at this time of year. What do you say to Mr. Guilbeault?
I respect Stephen. He's a friend. We have a different view on how we're going to get to net zero. The Prime Minister has said we're going to build our way to net zero, not shrink and prohibit our way to net zero. We're doing that by building the largest carbon capture and storage project in the world. We're doing that by creating functioning carbon markets that we did not have before under the old plan. We're doing that by announcing an electricity strategy, which is doubling our clean generating electric grid, which will reduce emissions. We're doing that by adding more nuclear to the baseload power mix. We're doing that by adding new investment in transmission so we can add more renewables to the grid. We're going to grow our way to net zero, not shrink our way to net zero. And telling Canadians that they can't do things at a time where national unity is in play isn't the way that we build a strong Canada.
You talk about the environmental record. Earlier this week, the Prime Minister, or the environmental aspirations, I suppose I should say, the Prime Minister said earlier this week in that forward guidance video that as part of Canada's push to be an energy superpower, Canada's emissions are going to rise in the next few years. Which climate targets are we going to miss, sir?
We're focused on 2050. The Prime Minister has been very clear. We're going to get to net zero by 2050.
Anything before that?
Climate
not in play then?
We're focused on getting to 2050. That's what we're focused on.
Okay. Minister Tim Hodgson, thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Take care.
You too. Well, as we've been discussing, Alberta has formally submitted its bid to build a new oil pipeline, but it's not proposing a route to the northwest coast of British Columbia. Alberta is pitching 2 southern routes. Both would follow closely along the path of the current Trans Mountain Expansion pipeline. The northern route was no longer an option when Prime Minister Mark Carney said he would uphold the federal tanker ban on BC's north coast. This pipeline has Prime Minister Mark Carney's full endorsement, but for one Liberal MP, it's what brought his time in cabinet and eventually in caucus to an end. Joining me, Quebec Liberal MP and former Minister of the Environment, Steven Guilbeault. Thank you for coming into studio.
My pleasure, Catherine.
Now, you posted online that this announcement is both good news and bad news. Can you explain that?
I said less bad news in the case of the pipeline route because from an environmental perspective, going to the north would have been an environmental catastrophe. So at least now it seems we want to explore a southern route which would follow along the corridor of existing pipelines, namely Trans Mountain, TMX. So it's not a good news, but it's less bad news. And I mean, in terms of the overall announcement, we're announcing at a time where we're seeing record temperatures, heat waves in northeastern North America, in southern France, in more than 59 degrees Celsius at the thermometer before humidity in southern Pakistan. We're saying we're going to fuel more climate change. I mean, that's not what we said, but that's basically what we're doing. When Canada and Alberta signed the MOU just 7 months ago, we said if there's a pipeline, it's going to be paid for by the private sector. It's not paid for by the private sector. Canadian taxpayers are going to be on the hook for tens of billions of dollars for yet another fossil fuel infrastructure, which we don't know whether or not it will be profitable in the long term. With all due respect to the Prime Minister, who said, you know, wonderful, TMX is generating $1 billion of revenue, it's going to social programs. We will make money with TMX maybe 34 years from now, because that's what the cost of the pipeline was, $34 billion. So it's hard to see where there's a good news there for Canadians.
We put some of your concerns to Minister Hodgson. He says telling Canadians that they can't do things at a time when national unity is in play isn't the way we build a strong Canada. He also talked to us about CUSMA negotiations not going forward. His argument is we need this right now, security, affordability. What do you say to him?
I profoundly disagree with Minister Hodgson. Everything he talked about, to what he said to you, electricity, interties in Canada, more clean electricity, all of these things had been announced under the previous administration. All the tax credits had been announced under the previous administration. There's already carbon capture and storage happening in Canada. I'm very skeptical of the Pathways project.
I was going to say, the scale of the Pathways, I mean, that is something that this government has really been leaning into.
Let's be realistic about the scale. We sequester in Canada on average about 4 million tons a year. Pathway would be 16. Our target is 300. It's not going to change the equation of fighting climate change in Canada. It helps if it ever gets realized, which I don't think it will. They've been talking about it for more than 10 years. They haven't done anything about it. There's nothing in the announcement yesterday that gives anyone any confidence that it's going to be more than just talking about this. So it doesn't change the equation of what happens in Canada.
I want to talk about what the Prime Minister has said recently beyond this project. He put out that forward guidance video earlier this week. He addressed climate change in conjunction with energy shortages, Canada's U.S. reliance. He said, nobody knows how long the global economy will rely on conventional energy, but while it does, as much of that energy as possible should come from Canada, produced responsibly and with a clear focus on lowering emissions over time. What do you make of that argument?
I have a very difficult time reconciling what the Prime Minister is saying now with what he was saying before he was Prime Minister. He wrote a book, Values, in which I believe 2 chapters were dedicated to the fight against climate change, to the fact we needed to divert our investment from fossil fuels because these would become stranded assets, so assets that will no longer be profitable and that most likely taxpayers will be on the hook for. He made speeches at United Nations conference. The fact that more than 600 people die in heat waves in the greater Vancouver area in 2021 is no longer relevant?
He seems to be clearly arguing that things have changed, that when you look at what's happened with Iran, the global energy supply, and trade, that Canada needs this now in a way it didn't before.
No one believed 5 years ago when the Prime Minister was making those speeches at UN conferences on climate change that we needed to divest from fossil fuels. That we were going to wean ourselves of fossil fuels tomorrow morning. When we ran during the last election platform, the last election, our platform mentioned climate change 28 times. Donald Trump had been elected then. Tariffs were already in place. Yes, okay, you could argue that Iran was not happening during the last federal election, but that's pretty much the only thing that has changed.
Minister Hodgson specifically cited CUSMA. He said, look at what happened on July 1st. They don't want to renew. That's one more reason we need this pipeline.
Well, I'm not an expert on CUSMA, and I believe Minister Hodgson isn't either, but my understanding is that if there's no renegotiation, the agreement stands as is, and all of the products that are not taxed under CUSMA going to the United States will continue to benefit from that agreement.
So I'd like to understand then how you're making sense of this, because you're saying, look at what he wrote in Values, look at what he's doing now, and you're suggesting, I believe, that these two things don't align. How do you make sense of that?
I can't. And that's why I decided to leave. The people who sent me to Ottawa, three elections in a row, my constituents believe strongly, and every day I walk in the streets of my riding, Catherine, people stop me on the street and say thank you for what you've done. Thank you for your work in government, but thank you for leaving when you felt you could no longer represent us adequately, because they care deeply about this. And I know that not a majority of Canadians think that climate change is a major issue right now. There's still about 40% who believe it is, so that's not nothing. But that's why I'm leaving.
Are you disappointed with Mark Carney?
I don't understand. I was his Quebec lieutenant in the last election in Quebec. I must have been active in 10, probably a dozen different ridings, knocking on doors, hundreds, if not thousands, a few thousands of doors. And what I told people is that they could vote for us, even people who don't usually vote for us, like people who usually vote NDP or Green or Bloc Québécois in Quebec. And saying, he's going to continue the fight against climate change. He's a climate change champion. Look at everything he's done at the Bank of England, with the United Nations, the book he wrote, the speeches he made. So I can't reconcile that, and therefore it was impossible for me to stay.
You told people he was a climate change champion. You would tell them today what?
It's clearly climate change is no longer a priority for this government. And I'm not saying by that we're not doing anything. There are still a number of measures that are in place, but we'll be lucky if, when I left as Environment Minister, we were this close to hitting our 2030 targets. For the first time in history, Canada was going to hit its target. We'll be lucky now if we're a third of the way to Stephen Harper's target by 2030. There's no way we can get to net zero with what's been announced in the past few months. In 2050.
We just heard Minister Hodgson say that is what we are working towards.
I would pay good money to see the analysis, his analysis that showed that we can get there, because everything I've seen says that we can't.
I want to ask you in closing, I mean, we've now seen two Liberal prime ministers who have talked about the importance in their careers of climate change, use public money to build new pipelines to Tidewater. What do you think that tells us about where the Liberal Party stands on environmental issues?
I mean, I disagreed with the first pipeline, and I said so publicly before I came into politics, and even when I was in politics. I think there's a fundamental difference between this administration and the previous one. Under the previous one, for the first time in Canada's history, we had a plan that was working. The idea that we were chasing away investors. In 2024, Canada came in second in the G20 in terms of direct foreign investment, in terms of the size of our economy. We were able, through public policies, to show that we could grow the economy, create jobs, and reduce pollution. That's a fundamental difference between what was happening then and what is happening now.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for your time, Steven.
Thank you, Catherine.